Good evening, everyone.
Não é melhor ficar mute.
Good evening, or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening is for the Israeli audience. My name is Adrian Tepper. I'm the director for Latin America at the University of Haifa. Thank you all for joining this event. We are happy to host you here with us. I would like to explain a little bit about our translation system this afternoon. Please note that there is an icon on your lower screen with translation sign. I hope that everyone can see it. You can click on and you will have the audio in Portuguese by our translator, or another click and you keep on original audio in English. We're going to explain it in Portuguese in a few minutes. Now, we would like to start with a short video, a wonderful video about the University of Haifa and the city of Haifa.
You want to experience Israel, huh? Well, you didn't hear it from me, but the place to do this is called Haifa. Israel's third largest city, Haifa is definitely its friendliest. A surprising, dynamic metropolis with a sweet, low-key attitude in the middle of some of Israel's most gorgeous scenery. And right at the top, you've got the University of Haifa. If Haifa is the best of Israel, then the university is the best of Haifa. Arabic, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Druze, Baha'i, beach, mountain, industry, high-tech, academic excellence, and an active student life. It's all right here. Here you get a panoramic view, not only of the Galilee and the Mediterranean, but of everything a top academic institution has to offer. Aside from academics, we've got tours, trips, lectures, campus activities, concerts, conferences, sports activities, and that's just the beginning. Here, you'll be who you want to be, because this place lets you be who you are.
Okay. Now it's my pleasure to invite the panel, which will deal with the complex issue of studies in Corona age and what the future holds. Mr. Professor Ron Robin, the president of the University of Haifa, an expert in North American history. He was a member of the University of Haifa for more than 20 years, of which held several positions, including that of Dean in 2006. He joined the University of New York, where among other tasks, he was vice rector and responsible for establishing the campuses in Abu Dhabi. Yes, it's Abu Dhabi, it's not a mistake, and Shanghai. Professor Robin is the author of 6 books and dozens of articles. We will also have the pleasure to host here with us Professor Celso Lafer, that I believe that all of you know him in Brazil, Professor Emerito of University of Sao Paulo and former Minister of Foreign Affairs in Brazil. We also, in this wonderful team, have the Professor Ary Plonsky, Director of the Institute of Advanced Studies at the University of Sao Paulo. And last, but very important, our president of the Brazilian Association Friends of University of Haifa, Mr. Avi Gelber, please.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's a complex issue in this period of pandemic, how we deal with education. Education is, for me, the main issue that we have to treat all over and all around the world, and mainly here in Brazil. So let's try in the next 50 minutes to give some of our points of view to our spectators. I'll start with Professor Ron. First, nice to see you again. And I would like to know, good evening. I would like to know a little bit how the university acted during the pandemic. What changed in the methodology of teaching, and how did the university adapt itself to the new scenario? Or how is teaching on distance? How is teaching on online system today? Please, Professor.
Thank you. Once again, good evening. I'm happy to be here. I'm delighted to be here. And I hope you're all safe and looking after yourself in this complicated period. So when the pandemic became a major issue worldwide, at that particular time, I was the head of the University Presidents Association. We have 7 public universities, 8 public universities. 7 of the public universities are in a group called VERA, and I was chairman of VERA at the time and very much involved in this transition from an analog university to a digital university. And it was a complicated state of affairs for many reasons. I'll begin with one which you perhaps didn't even think of. All our professors are unionized and they are part of a union. And getting everybody in the union to agree to changing the way they teach, getting the government to agree to continue paying the professors even though the system had changed, was my main concern at the very beginning. It turned out that we were all the universities, even though we were not aware of this, we were technologically prepared for this. Once we reached all the presidents, the 7 presidents reached a decision together with government to close down the campus physically and move online. The technology was there. We had been working on this technology for some time. To be very frank with you, we were unaware how far ahead we were. And we were able to move within days. This took maybe 3 days to move the entire university curriculum online. But having said that, there have been tremendous drawbacks. Obviously, we've been able to continue talking, teaching, interacting with our students. But at the same time, I'm sure my panelists will agree that teaching online, no matter how creative you are, and Zoom and other platforms do allow you to be creative, to introduce material that is difficult to produce when you're just talking in front of a classroom. No matter how creative we were, the human touch has been very significantly absent from the way we teach. I can tell you now that as we are slowly returning to campus life, we've begun returning to campus life. I'll talk about that perhaps a little later. I can say the following: despite many predictions that the world has changed and that teaching has changed, I beg to differ. I think due to human habit and the human need for actual contact, for physical, tactile contact, I do believe that the changes that we will see will perhaps not be as profound as maybe some of my other colleagues think, and that we'll be returning to the classroom, I would expect in the summer, fully in the summer. And the impact of this period on our teaching will be present, but will not be nearly as significant as maybe some of my colleagues here think it would be. So maybe I'll stop here, Avi, and I'll come back and elaborate after I've heard my colleagues.
Okay. Ary, let's hear about what do you think and what is your vision of what happened here in Brazil in the same period. We still, unfortunately, not like Israel, that life is starting to come back to normal. Here we still are in the ups of the pandemic situation. Can you tell us a little bit on your view about teaching online, teaching in distance, and all the situation that we are passing here?
Yes, thank you so much, Avi. I would like to begin by thanking the honor that University of Haifa and the Friends of University of Haifa give to University of São Paulo, to the Institute of Advanced Studies, and to myself to participate with Professor Ron Robin in this panel about, as you mentioned before, Avi, a critical subject, which is the subject of learning. Now, I will begin by saying that one of the tenets of the university world is called autonomy, and there is an academic autonomy, so you don't have a uniform answer in Brazil among the universities. So I can talk about my own village called University of São Paulo. It is a rather large village. It has 90,000 students, 60,000 undergrad and 30,000 grad. It's public, belongs to the state of São Paulo, receives around 5% of the taxes that the state of São Paulo collects, of the main taxes, and it is responsible for around 20% of the Brazilian academic output. Usually it's well positioned in the rankings. Now, I will give the numbers and then make some comments. In 2020, the first year of the pandemic, that we thought it would be the only year, but let's say the first year of the pandemics, we had, by the end of the year, that 93% of all 5,500 disciplines that we have in the university, the theories, let's say the class part was finished in due time, which is, according to our calendar, March to December, in a remote way. I prefer the term remote than distance, because remote means separate by an interval or space greater than usual, and distance might be understood as reserved or aloof in personal relationship. It means something cold. And the fact that you are remote doesn't mean that you cannot have also some human touch, human approach, as it was mentioned. Now, so as I mentioned, 93% of the disciplines were taught in due time. The wet lab for the medical school, etc., was done between January and March this year. And next week on Monday, we begin the new academic year. Now, about what happened in more, let's say, human aspects. First, the university has been under strong pressure to increase the number of students from communities like Black people, Indians, and people from public school to be accepted at the university. So they obviously have an exam, but the proportion of middle class and lower income class people in the university had changed a lot. So what was found out is that some students didn't have a notebook at home. Some students had a phone, but the phone was not a smartphone. And some students couldn't pay for the bill of the telecom company if they would attend all the classes using the cell phone. So the university made a big effort. All parts of the university, other students, and it was a collective effort to buy chips for the phones, to negotiate with the telecom that for these students that are registered at universities, they would not pay for excess cell phone and find notebooks. But there is still a issue, which is learning space at home, because if we are fortunate to be middle class and have a 2-3 dorm apartment, often a sizable part of the students are crammed in a very small space with siblings and parents, and you have not the best connection with Wi-Fi, etc., etc. So this is a complicated challenge. Obviously, the university was also reasonably prepared. We had a Moodle, we used some of the platforms, and but obviously we had to increase rapidly this use and change the methods of teaching. And most of all, tells the faculty that they also have to give, besides the content of the disciplines, also emotional support. So to try to see in the screen who could maybe be in a situation that needs some support. Several practical questions appear if you do management of the student experience. For instance, open camera. Can a teacher ask the students to have an open camera? What about privacy? What about the exams? Zoom fatigue. How do you connect flipped class learning and other new pedagogical methods with the facts that we are online? I now can talk about the business school where I am involved. Obviously, we did a lot of surveys to see how things are going, and there were comments that some things are for the good and some things are for the bad. For instance, things that are for the bad is that the faculty in a large proportion began increasing the amount of homework of the students. I think we were afraid that they wouldn't do things because they are far away, and it became a little bit exaggerated. Good things that happened is that the classes were recorded, and so a lot of students told us, okay, this is something new. If we don't understand something, we have access through the platforms to Moodle to what was taught, and we can go over statistics 8 times until we grab it. So that's, I think, important aspects. And finally, one of the students wrote in the report something which is, I would say, also important, and I quote, that our teachers are also human beings. We have noted that the same as some of my colleagues, some of the teachers are very in a very bad emotional situation due to the pandemics and due to this new way of teaching. I suggest that the university also takes care of the teachers and not only of the students.
Yes, it's a very complex situation for everybody, for sure, not only students. Only a curiosity to know, how did you evaluate the results and the performance of the students?
Well, you have 2 types of performance. One, which is called reaction evaluation, is something which is done in the university for decades, is an evaluation at the end of the semester of some 25 questions about the perception of the student about the learning process. How many hours, what was the report with the faculty, etc., etc., etc. So, and then you have kind of a grade. So the average grade, I'm talking about of the business school where I teach, from 2017 to 2019, to take the 3 years before the pandemics, was between, from 0 to 10, was between 7.2 and 7.5. Last year, to our surprise, I would say positive surprise, it was 7.9. So the students were, as a reaction, more satisfied last year than they have been the 3 years before. Not very much different, but a recognizable difference, yes.
Okay, let's hear a little bit, Professor Lafer, your opinion, your view about all this situation. I must say, Professor Lafer, that we miss you so much in the Foreign Affairs Ministry today, more than ever. And if you can give us a little bit about your view here, and if you know something internationally about it, please.
Thank you. I think Ary has given a broad and precise picture of what is happening in the University of São Paulo. I'm aware of everything he has said, but since I am now a retired emeritus professor, my own experience is limited. But I will just tell one experience, which is my own experience. I was giving last year, after a long period, a graduate course on international relations and international affairs. And one of my collaborators said, well, instead of giving a course based on theory, why don't you give a course based on your own experience and check what were the theories that were useful for practice and what were those that were not useful. I said, well, that's a very good idea. I had given with him many years ago a course of the same nature. And this course started on the traditional presential way. A group of very qualified students. And it was my hope that this interaction with the students would give me the opportunity to later on write a more elaborate paper on this relation between theory and practice based on experience, having these students as the soundboard of this discussion. So the course started on a presential way, and it went very well, up to the moment that the campus was closed and we could not proceed with the course. Then, of course, the decision was, will we suspend the course or we will give it in a different manner? I was not prepared to give the same type of course because I really needed the presence of the students for this type of sounding board, which I didn't feel I could get through a digital way, being a man of the analogical era. So we reorganized the course on the basis of previous lectures that I had given. And then there was a very interesting interaction with the student. Now, one of the things that Ary has mentioned, and I think is right, that for the students, the fact that they were having access to previous lectures gave them an added knowledge and information of what was being given. And that, of course, enhanced the discussion of the final outcome of the course. I know that my colleagues at the law school are all giving normally their courses on the basis of what has to be done. There was a strong difficulty for the elder or the more senior professors to adapt themselves to this new mode of teaching, but it has had, as Ary said, its good moments and its bad moments. And its good aspects were those that they obtained a greater increase of the materials through the Zoom and the platforms. But they also were responsible for a very considerable amount of stress among many of my colleagues that felt very uncomfortable because, as Professor Robin has said, these techniques are excellent techniques and they are part of what today is the scene of teaching and research. But it is difficult to substitute the presence that comes through the personal interaction of a professor with his students. And this, I think, is something we cannot forget if and when here we get back to the normal.
Yes, for sure, this interaction is a very big miss that we have in this point. I'll take this point and ask Professor Ron. The faculty in Israel, the University of Haifa, is known as a place of diversity. A lot of students from a lot of places and a lot of representative religious, etc. And Haifa, the city, I know I was born there and I can tell everybody that it's a city of pluralism. And how the university missed this point and treat this point as not distanceary, remote teaching.
Yeah, so yes, I see we have a rather large audience, and maybe I'll just state a fact or two about the university. We're absolutely the university that is creating Israel's new middle class, which is embracive of all the groups in Israeli society. We live up north, and when I look out of my window northwards, about 50% of the population is Jewish. If I were to remove the metropolitan area of Haifa and just look without Haifa, about 25% of the population is Jewish. The rest of the population are Muslims, Druze, and Christians. And we are the university where all these four groups come together, I would say, on more or less a level playing field. Having said that, and just to give another sense of this, of our 18,000 students, about 33% are Arabs, either Christians, Muslims, or Druze. Among our undergraduates, it's 40%. And one of the biggest issues and one of the biggest challenges is language. Hebrew is the language we teach in Hebrew, of course, but it's an acquired language for our students who come from minority communities, and it's a challenge. They come to university with sort of like a scholastic Hebrew, which they have studied at school, at high school. And there's a difference between colloquial history and academic, colloquial Hebrew and academic Hebrew. And bridging that gap online was a tremendous challenge. And the only way that we could overcome that challenge was through very intense tutoring, which we introduced into the university during this period, offering extensive tutoring, especially for our Arab students who come from, mostly from small towns and villages in the north of Israel. I think Ary mentioned this as well, and Celso, you mentioned this as well. There were emotional issues. There were this effort to somehow keep up with class while you are isolated, and you don't have, when you look left or right, there's nobody there who, even through their body language, can tell you what their experience is. It caused significant emotional issues, which once again, virtually or remotely, we adapted to and offered psychological help to our students. I will also say that we had similar problems to the ones that you had at the University of Sao Paulo, in the sense that some of our students in rural areas had poor communication, poor telecommunication capacities with the university. We too did a similar exercise, offering laptops and offering smartphones for students who had issues with this. But we pride ourselves that we managed to overcome this. I think we all know that Israel is often described as the startup nation. But were you to look at statistics, you would find that the high-tech community in Israel, which is responsible for this tremendously robust economy that we have in the country, is really about 8 to 10% of the population, and that's it. And what we see at the university is that the future of this robust economy, the future of the startup nation, depends very heavily on the fact that we embrace other groups who perhaps have been on the sidelines, who have been on the margins of this. And the University of Haifa, as well as the Technion, both in the city of Haifa, which Avi described very accurately, are responsible in many ways for expanding this community. And we have managed to tell you whether I can give you how well we have managed. We will know at the end of the school year when we do the assessments that we always do, and we do assessments that we don't usually do to understand how distant learning has affected our students. But I hope, and I'm pretty sure we have managed to make, I can see by statistics, we've had very low dropout rates. So that suggests to me that we've managed to keep our diverse student body intact. And as we move into next year, which will probably, it looks like will be a regular year where we'll have frontal connections with our students, I hope we've managed to somehow bridge this year. The biggest issue is freshmen, first-year students. We have brought them back to campus now. The only students who are on campus now are first-year students. So at least they get a campus experience, and that we can address some of the problems which are probably more acute among first-year students than those who have had a campus experience. So that would be it, Avi. Thank you.
Ron, I'll still want to ask you about the other side of the university, the researching side, research development, a little bit. How do you deal with research in this period? How do you keep on track with a lot of work that you are doing in the university in normal days, and also with cooperation with other universities in the world. That we know that Haifa University is a very big player in the scenario of all the universities. So please give us a little bit about it.
So two or three aspects I'll mention. The first one is that at least during the first few months, we absolutely closed down everything, including our wet labs. And you know, those that have experimental animals in them as well. This was a tremendous loss for research. All labs were closed down for the first 4 or 5 months. And then we gradually started receiving permission from the Ministry of Health under very strict constraints to reopen the wet labs. We did, as you suggested here in your question, begin to share with other universities where there was similar research or similar equipment, because we're basically a small country and none of the universities are nearly as large as the ones that you have in Brazil. We were able to collaborate and use common space to maintain research wherever possible. Being a university where social sciences is a major part and component of our research, after a series of adaptations, I think we managed to do something in some of the labs. In the vast majority of the labs, we managed to continue from, but at homes and at distant locations. We were able to reconstruct our research in the social sciences. And of course, like everybody else, we started doing significant research on the impact of COVID on also all aspects of life: education, commerce, and politics, anything you can think of. And you know, we are, I think, if I to explain the secret ingredient of Israeli society, it's the ability to improvise. We are masters at improvising. Sometimes we improvise when we don't need to improvise. We like to short circuit. But this time it served us well, as we figured out improvisations that allowed us to continue our research. And today all the wet labs are open and working, and pretty much all the labs are back on track. But some of these improvisations will have some lasting effect, I think, and will allow us to be a little bit more flexible in where actually we do our research.
Professor Celso, please give us a little bit about your view on research and development on this period. We have in São Paulo also institutes that you were head of one of them, of APESP. How in the universities and on this institute we worked in this period of pandemic?
Obviously, in dealing with the pandemic, the issue of science and knowledge became a crucial dimension of public policies, and therefore the ability to obtain qualified information to deal with public policies was crucial. In the state of São Paulo, a very important institute is the Butantan Institute. And the Butantan Institute has been specialized for decades on vaccines. FAPESP, which is the São Paulo Foundation for the Support of Research that I presided, continuously gave support to many of the projects of Butantan. This is to mention that Butantan was able to pool knowledge as a result of its previous projects and as a result of the interactions it had with the main universities of the state of São Paulo. This includes highly qualified people in the area of medicine, of the two medical schools of the University of São Paulo. also of the Federal University. The fact is that today, as a result of this accumulated knowledge, the Butantan Institute has produced the most significant number of vaccines that are being currently part of our program. It will reach 48 million in the end of this month. Now, this was only possible because there was a pool of knowledge that was supported by long-term research. I always recall a phrase by Pasteur that the previous scientific director of FAPESP used to quote, that there is no applied science, there is application of science to the challenges of the day. And I think this interaction that we have here between the universities, the private sectors, the medical sectors, the universities and the faculties of related to health, medicine, and public health were crucial in dealing with this fact. I note that this obviously involves international cooperation with other countries and other institutions. But the fact that we have a base that is qualified is what is giving us conditions to face a very significant challenge, because we cannot deal with the pandemic only with social isolation. We have to have social isolation, but we have to think of how we are going to overcome this situation, and this comes through the whole process of vaccination. The same happens in the other institute that is important in Brazil, is situated in Rio, Oswaldo Cruz, who also is capable of producing vaccines and is producing vaccines as a result also of this pool and density of research. I think this is a good example of how you can focus, not with the quality of improvisation that Israel has, but we have been muddling through, and in this area, I think quite well.
Professor Ary, I'll ask you the same question, but with another point of view. Do you think that people are giving more value today to research after seeing the needs that we have in a period like in a pandemic, and not only in medicine, in biotechnology and other issues? Is it something that maybe helped us to give this importance to research and development?
Thank you for the challenging question. Well, I think the first thing we have to recognize is the enormous increase in general literacy about science. Terms as R0, efficacy, transmissibility, etc., that a year and a few months ago were totally out of the realm of speech, of thought, of millions of people, suddenly became common language. People watch the news in social networks or TV or read papers or whatever. So I think the general concept that science matters became a very positive factor. On the other hand, we have obviously tensions that very often come from other realms of politics, and we know several countries where that happened, and where that unfortunately happens, that try to not say that, not to deny science, but to distort science. And distortion is worse than denial. I wouldn't say you find many people who say research and development is not important, science is not important. But what comes together not always is what one would call good science, as Professor Lafer mentioned, the science that can be applied to the current challenges. So on one hand, obviously you have light and shadow. Light is literacy and awareness of science, and the shadow is the distortion, and very often intentional distortion of science, and that makes people confused. And we'll see how we manage with that. In our institute this morning, we had a meeting to establish a process for seminars and then a group exactly to deal with the issue, which is not new, but under this perspective that you brought us, which is science in a plural society. Because you don't have one understanding of science. You have one understanding of science in the financial sector, one understanding of science in students. Science in plural society. Hope that we have a new opportunity in a year from now, and I imagine that we can also find friends and colleagues at University of Haifa to make this discussion more fruitful and learn mutually from our experiences in Israel and in Brazil.
Thank you. Last question for all of you. I'll start with Ron again. How is the day after? You started to tell us Israel is the country that is most close to the day after today, we believe. And you told us a little bit that first year freshmen are in the faculty today. How you see all the day after in the university for teaching and for research?
Sorry, I was on mute. Before I address the university, let me say a little bit about the day after in Israeli society in general, and then extrapolate from that to the university. The day after, we have some scars, and Ary has alluded to some of those scars, a certain skepticism that people have, a lack of confidence in science among certain groups in society. It's not across the board, thankfully, but in certain groups in society, and a hastening of certain trends that were in Israeli society before the pandemic and are now more acute, and that is mostly the decline of the political class. This is not something that's unique to Israeli society by any stretch of the imagination, and it's neither left nor right in Israeli society. It's across the board. There's been a decline in the political class to the point where you know that we have elections now. This is, we're heading perhaps towards our 5th election in 2 years, unable to resolve a long-standing political divide in our society. All of this has left us with some scars. It's not possible to shrug this off the day after, and building civil society again is going to be one of the greatest challenges facing Israel. And here, once again, universities play a very significant role. And the amount of activity that we do outside of the classroom in our cities and in our communities will be, I think, one of the issues that we will have to think of very seriously as we move into the day after. As far as the universities are concerned, technically, as I mentioned, we've moved to freshmen because that's the most vulnerable part of our population right now. They have no university experience, and the minority students, of course, have a whole series of other issues that they have to come to terms with as we move on. The next group of students will be mature students, those who do MA and PhD. That's the next group of students who will be coming back to campus, probably after, as early as after Yom Ha'atzmaut, which is next week. So about 10 days, 2 weeks from today, we'll probably return our students who are in the MA classes. And by the summer, I would assume already our dorms are full, by the way, even though some of the classes are still remote. Students have come back to the dorms and are living on campus under whatever restrictions they have to be. And so there is tremendous pressure from the student body to return to some sort of normalcy. Very frankly, I'm not sure the professors would not mind continuing until the end of the year doing this remotely, but the pressure from the student body is quite impressive, dramatic even, I would say. And by the summer, I would assume that we would be back to normal. Most of our classrooms today are hybrid, or a significant group of our classrooms today are hybrid, assuming that some students, perhaps some who have not been vaccinated, although that group is relatively small, it's actually very small now. Perhaps some of our students who have medical issues will continue teaching, at least for undergraduate students. We'll continue teaching in hybrid classrooms with all the difficulties that involves. It will still allow some students who are unable to come back to campus to continue studying. So we are very close to returning to normalcy. And normal, I go back to the beginning, my first comment here, normal is surprisingly similar to the period before the pandemic. I thought we would have more significant changes than I see on the horizon right now.
Yes, I hope that what we see in Israel today, on the good side of recovering the situation and coming back to life, to a certain normality, we hope here that it will happen also as soon as possible, but we still have a long way to run here. Professor Ary, please, how do the University of São Paulo and yourself see the day after in Brazil?
First, we praise that the day after will be very soon. Second, I believe that you have three major possibilities, which is one that Professor Ron Robin alluded, that it is surprisingly similar to what was before. The second extreme would be it is completely different. We live in a different world, and I personally think that this won't be the case. And number three, we'll have an accelerated process of transformation. University, if I can talk about university is a very long-term endeavor. The first recognized university, Bologna, was 1088. In not so many years, we'll have 1,000 years of university. So we look usually not the day after, we look at the next decade, the next century, and also this makes it easier to make predictions, because nobody will be around to tell us that we were wrong, obviously. But I believe that what my personal belief is that we'll have an acceleration of transformation processes that would happen anyhow. I give you just one example in terms of teaching, of learning, which is called the flipped classroom. And Professor Ron alluded to that too in his early comments. So this was something which was happening anyhow. And Professor Celso Lafer also alluded to that when he mentioned the experience that he had with the students at the law school at our university. So I believe that, to conclude, I believe that what we'll have is the acceleration of transformations in society and in the university that would happen in a much longer term.
Professor Lafer, how do you see the day after, and what good things we can take from all this period of suffering that we have here in Brazil, heavy suffering that we have here in Brazil? Only unmute yourself.
It's a pertinent and very hard question. I think Ary has responded to it very well. I agree with him. I think that the pandemic will speed the process of transformation. And in a certain sense, our experience now with the pandemics will make us better equipped to deal with these challenges of transformation that will come about. I mean, the fact is that we have to deal with this transformation from the analogical era to the digital era. That's a fact that today is undoubtedly part of it. I'll just give an example. In 1992, when I was, for the first time, foreign minister, the cell phone was a very big box. And I had to have someone carry it for me because I could not carry this thing and at the same time deal with other things. And obviously it was very limited, but it was the way through which this speed of communication could be dealt with. Now, if 92 to now, it's 20 years, and I don't have to emphasize how much change there is today. So we have to think that the pandemic has equipped us with a greater learning capacity to deal with these changes, and that's a positive aspect. Even though it stresses us, or in my case, it stresses me a lot. But I have a son who helps me, and I will soon have my grandchildren helping me too, so I will be able to survive.
We need you here for a long time. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you, everybody. For me, I would stay here for hours and talk with you because it's so fascinating to hear all these things and all what you are doing for education. Permit me to pass a short film for students, for the public that see us. Part of it is our students, and I would like to show a short film and finish our meeting in a while. Please pass the film if you can, Marisa.
היי, שמי קובי, סטודנט בשנה שלישית בפקולטה למשפטים. תקופת הקורונה מאוד הקשתה עליי, הוצאתי לחל"ת, נאלצתי גם אני לחזור לגור עם ההורים.
היי, אני קורל, סטודנטית לריפוי בעיסוק בשנה שנייה באוניברסיטה. כמו רבים וטובים מחבריי, עבדתי כדי לממן את הלימודים שלי. עבדתי בזאפה עד פרוץ המגפה, ובעקבות ביטול אירועי התרבות הוציאו אותי לחל"ת. ניסיתי למצוא עבודה אחרת, אבל לצערי ללא הצלחה.
שנה האחרונה עבורי הייתה מאוד מורכבת, בגלל שפוטרתי מעבודה ולא יכולתי להמשיך בלימודים. אז היו לי מחשבות לעזוב את הלימודים, לפרוש מהלימודים.
התקופה הייתה מאוד מאוד קשה, הריחוק מהמשפחה, הלימודים מרחוק מהזום, הלחץ הנפשי שהביאה איתה הקורונה.
אחד הדברים שבאמת ככה עזרו לי להתמודד עם הקשיים האלו, זה בעצם המלגה שקיבלתי. עטפו אותי מכל הכיוונים, העניקו לי מלגה שמאפשרת לי להמשיך ללמוד בראש שקט ולהצליח.
בזכות התמיכה שקיבלתי מהאוניברסיטה, הרגשתי שאני לא לבד.
בזכות אותן מלגות הצלחתי לצלוח את התקופה הזאת, ועל כך אני אסירת תודה.
אז תודה.
תודה רבה.
במהלך השנה האחרונה, על רקע המשבר הבריאותי-כלכלי, סטודנטיות וסטודנטים רבים הגיעו לנקודה שבה נאלצו לחשוב על הפסקת לימודים. הודות לתרומות הנדיבות שלכם, הצלחנו לעזור לרבים מהם. לצערי, גם כיום, כשכבר אפשר לראות את האור בקצה המנהרה, סטודנטיות וסטודנטים רבים מתמודדים עם חוסר הוודאות, ועתידם האקדמי עדיין מוטל בספק על רקע כלכלי. דווקא עכשיו אנחנו זקוקים לזריקת עידוד, למאמץ קטן נוסף ולתרומות נוספות.
This is a little bit of the point of view of the students. I would like to thank everybody of being with us today and tell everybody that we have a lot of programs for students in the Haifa University, short, medium and long-term programs. We also will support with scholarship some of the students that will apply. All the details you can see in our website or in our contact that is here in our Zoom. Again, Professor Ron, if you want to give us your goodbye words, please.
Yes, thank you so much, Avi. First of all, I'm overwhelmed by the support that we receive from our Brazilian friends. It's only recently that we have revived our Brazilian friends, and it already is coming roaring back into our lives. I think it's been a wonderful opportunity to talk to two wonderful colleagues who deal with problems that are similar to ours. Israeli society, there are no natural resources except brain power, and the university is our natural resource, and supporting the students at our university promises a robust society in Israel for everyone, for Jews and for Arabs, and for stability in the region, and for creativity in the world. So thank you all for your support. We're deeply grateful.
Thank you, Professor Ron Robin. Professor Lafer, please, your words.
Professor Robin has said everything that is needed. I'm glad he feels that the friends of Haifa are present in his concerns and also in his satisfactions. We are all very glad to be useful in these challenging times that we have.
Thank you. Professor Ary Plonsky, please.
Just to finish thanking again the honor and mentioning that during the period 2015 to 2020, we had several amount of papers published jointly by researchers at University of Haifa and USP, 81 at USP and 26 at University of Haifa. And what is interesting is the impact. The citation impact of University of São Paulo is 1.7, which means 72% than the average level in the world. University of Haifa is more or less similar. But when there is an article in co-authorship, the impact goes to 50.6 to be precise. It means that it is much, much higher than if you publish it individually. So yes, cooperation is essential. Yes, cooperation during pandemic continued, and the day after, and hopefully the week after, the months after, the years after, the cooperation should increase between our institutions.
Thank you all of you. Thank you everybody that joined us today. And for sure we will have to make another meeting to put up other issues that we couldn't do today. So thank you very much, and everybody have a pleasant day. Bye. See you.